Okay, so we're going to take a quick look now at facilitated diffusion. This is a topic that you may not have covered at high school, but what we've got here is the same membrane structure that we've already been looking at. So we have the phospholipids and we have either the channel or the carrier proteins. We have a high concentration of molecules on one side and a lower concentration of molecules on the other. So in this case, the higher concentration is on the left-hand side of the page and the lower concentration is on the right-hand side of the page. So naturally, the molecules are going to want to move from where it is higher to where it is lower. Now that can happen, but only if the molecules are given a passage or a channel through which they can move. So any molecules that have a charge, which we call polar molecules, or any molecules that are quite big, they have to go through some kind of channel or carrier. Now, they will move from a higher to a lower concentration only if the channel or the carrier is open. So in a way, it's a method of slowing down, stopping, or allowing molecules to move. If the channels are closed, doesn't matter how high the concentration is on one side, they will not be allowed to pass through the membrane. The phospholipids create a barrier against polar molecules. They only allow non-polar molecules through. So any kind of sodium ion, things like that, potassium ion, they cannot pass through because they are a charged polar molecule. They have to go through a channel protein to be allowed to pass through. So in terms of a definition, this is what we say. Facilitated diffusion is the movement of large or polar molecules. An example of a large molecule will be glucose, and a polar molecule is sodium ions. From a higher concentration to a lower concentration through a carrier, they tend to move bigger molecules, or through a channel protein, they would tend to move smaller molecules. So it's very similar to simple diffusion, but what you have in the membrane are proteins that allow charged molecules to move from one side to another. Something that's quite important is what will affect how quickly this can happen. Now, obviously, the surface area over which it occurs, if you've got a much bigger membrane, you're going to have more channels on that membrane naturally. How far it's diffusing, and like I said in one of the previous videos, the membrane is always the same size. It's always between 7 or 8 nanometers across. So the distance is always really, really quite small. The concentration does play a big factor. Obviously, the greater it is on one side and the lower it is on the other, you get a steeper gradient, it will happen faster. And then the number of channels within an area. So not just how big the membrane is. Obviously, a bigger membrane will have more channels, but the density of channels within an area will also affect how quickly molecules can move. The more channels you've got, the more gateways you've got to get through that membrane from a higher to a lower concentration. So that's facilitated diffusion. Hope it's been some use.